Tonight, breaking news, Russia unleashing new attacks on Ukraine's capital just hours after the head of the UN was touring damage there. 2 explosions rocking Kiev late today, apartments going up in flames, the desperate search for survivors now underway. Here at home, the financial buzzkill. The economy is shrinking, the disappointing first quarter numbers stoking fears the country could be barreling towards a recession. Industry giants like Amazon and Apple reporting their numbers, what they could reveal about where we're headed. Wild delivery, the Hollywood custody battle taking center stage. Olivia Wilde served legal documents from ex-fiancé Jason Sudeikis in front of a packed auditorium. The Ted Lasso star saying he had no idea what was about to happen. So how did that messenger get through security and walk right to the stage? ESPN just sued by one of its biggest stars, sportscaster Sage Steele, suing her employer, claiming the network retaliated against her for comments she made about President Obama and the network's COVID vaccine policy. So does she have a case, and can she stay with ESPN? A free speech expert and an entertainment attorney join Top Story. Plus, the family of Halyna Hutchins demanding police take down the harrowing footage of her final moments. This as even more new video comes to light, including the moment police told Alec Baldwin that Hutchins had died. What happened when investigators told the Hollywood star that devastating news? And crash and burn. A car slamming into a police cruiser at 95 miles an hour, igniting a massive fireball. 3 officers rushed to the hospital, the driver somehow able to walk away. What police say she had in her system. Top Story starts right now. And good evening. Tonight, Kiev under fire as Putin turns his sights back to the Ukrainian capital. At least 2 explosions rocking the city late today. Video taken in the immediate aftermath showing apartment buildings on fire. Shell-shocked residents surveying the damage. First responders rushing to rescue trapped civilians, racing to pull them out before darkness fell. That desperate search still ongoing. The blast coming just hours after the UN Secretary General toured the suburbs of Kiev, calling what he witnessed there horrendous and unacceptable. A spokesperson for the UN saying the general is, quote, safe, but shocked by tonight's attack. The relative peace in western Ukraine over the last several days now shattered as the situation in the east continues to deteriorate. Kelly Cobier is on the ground for us tonight and leads us off.
Late tonight, 2 explosions and the desperate scramble to find survivors under the rubble after new strikes in Kiev. Ukrainian officials saying 2 buildings were hit. A stunning bombardment on the city soon after the United Nations Secretary General met with Ukraine's president and toured Kiev's devastated suburbs, seeing the toll Russian forces left behind before they retreated weeks ago.
There is no way a war can be acceptable in the 21st century. Look at that.
And tonight, there are new signs Russia's assault is gaining momentum in the east, including this strike in Donetsk and another in Zaporizhia. In Kherson, now under Russian occupation, a television tower struck, though it's unclear who's responsible for that attack. And then there is besieged Mariupol. The UN Secretary General said President Putin told him this week he agreed in principle to a rescue plan. But today, inside the steel plant where Ukrainian soldiers and civilians are still holed up, Ukraine's National Guard putting out this video, it says, of people desperately digging wounded soldiers from the rubble after a makeshift hospital was hit with a concrete-busting bomb. In the ruins of the city, 100,000 people. Tonight, the mayor told me Russian soldiers won't let them leave. All the people who escaped, they use only one word to describe it: hell. There's no water, no electricity, nothing. Locals are forced to clear bodies from the streets in exchange for food and water, he said. In Russian, he said the decisions are made by one man. He decides who lives and who dies. Tonight, a senior U.S. defense official says some Russian forces are now moving away from Mariupol toward the northwest, and there are indications that they still do not control all of the city. Tom?
Kelly Cobier for us tonight. Kelly, thank you for that. The toll of war in Ukraine has been truly devastating. Nowhere has there been more evident than at the morgue in the city of Bucha, where teams are doing the agonizing work of identifying the dead. Cal Perry went there to talk to them about the atrocities they've witnessed We want to warn you, the story you're about to see is very disturbing.
This is the place the dead are counted, taken off a truck, put on a gurney, and into a tent. Those in Bucha, Ukraine, reeling from horrific attacks by Russian soldiers occupying the region, now being called war crimes.
We were not prepared for such a big amount of bodies because usually they do 7 bodies for months each team. We have just two teams here, so 14 bodies for months. Now they are doing 14 bodies per day.
But accountability is for a later time and place. For now, it's about removal, identification, and mourning.
It's emotional, it's very hard, but that's the job. We have to do this.
Even in the places where the fighting has stopped, the pain continues. Places like this, Bucha's main morgue, where victims of the massacre are being unloaded today.
An international effort with the assistance of French forensic experts. Some of these bodies will be identified today. And 2 American volunteers, Wade Helton and Daryl Lovelace, veterans who came here on their own accord to help handle the victims of war.
I was raised that that's the greatest love you could possibly do, is to help someone and risk your life for them, and these people need it more than anybody on the planet right now, I feel.
We watched this woman climb into a truck. I think she was looking for a loved one. What is that like? How do you explain that to people?
I don't know that I can explain it. I couldn't imagine the pain that she's going through. You don't have to.
She couldn't identify the body by facial features because it was decapitated. But she started describing the clothing that the last time she saw that member of her family.
She identified a sock.
And she identified a sock and a shirt, and that was enough for her to know that that was her family member.
Those at Bucha's main morgue coming face to face with atrocities.
They see burnt relatives, they see killed people, they see killed kids like 5 years old, 6 years old.
While also providing support for grieving families.
That's a big pain inside lots of people.
President Zelensky announcing more than 300 people were found dead in the Kiev suburb earlier this month. Bucha's mayor telling NBC News on Saturday that figure now has climbed over 400. World leaders, including President Biden, calling these brutalities war crimes.
Russia continues assault as yielding immense human cost. We've seen them leave behind horrifying evidence of their atrocities and war crimes.
Ukrainian prosecutors today filing criminal charges against 10 Russian soldiers who were there, saying an investigation revealed they took unarmed civilians as prisoners, starved them, tortured them, and robbed them.
You must feel what you're doing is important, though. You're documenting a massacre.
Homicide. It's homicide. And just like in the States, there's a protocol. Everything needs to be done just so everything can be processed and people can, be identified and the people that are responsible can be held accountable. Yeah. Accountability, 100%.
Cal Perry joins us now live with that report, of course, showing the realities of war there. Cal, I got to think that there's families that have left that area that are now coming back and trying to find their loved ones. Have you encountered any of these people?
Yeah, we have. And the United Nations says of the 7.7 million people who have been internally displaced, 15% of them are now trying to make their way back home. And what they're often finding when they come home are houses completely destroyed, sometimes bodies buried in their gardens. As they look for loved ones, oftentimes they go to the morgue with just pieces of information, a location, a name, an eyewitness report. And it's all the more difficult to witness when they're doing it with their children. Children, obviously, who are looking for lost parents, Tom.
Cal, I can't imagine what these families are going through to try to identify their loved ones by their socks, because they can't even make out what they look like, or it's physically impossible, like we heard there in your report. You had a question for one of those Americans that's helping out, what it was like to have to speak to these family members, to have to work there. I mean, but you and your team also witnessed it. What was it like to see those families going into those portable morgues and coming out with no answers?
It was incredibly hard. Photojournalist Sam Winslade, who shot it, and I were both struck. Again, when we saw a young boy there, he couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, and as a parent, we all immediately think of our kids. I mean, this is somebody who's looking for their hero, for their father, and he'll find his father likely in one of those morgue coolers. It's just incredibly difficult to watch. It must be impossible to live through, but it's one more sort of indication when we talk about this war. We often do so in such a sanitized manner about the weapons and about the tactics and about sort of armed forces, and oftentimes we forget that at the end of the line, it is these families whose lives are going to be forever altered, Tom.
Cal, it's stories like that that are a brutal reminder of what's happening in Ukraine right now. I want to thank you and your team. Stay safe out there, my friend. All right, moving on now. We want to turn now to the pandemic. Moderna announcing it is seeking FDA approval of its vaccine for children 6 years to 6 months old. The company says its vaccine may be less effective than the adult version, but does well at preventing severe illness. NBC's Stephanie Gosk has more.
A year and a half after the first COVID-19 vaccine for adults was authorized, Moderna now says it has a version for children ages 6 months through 5 years old that is safe and provides robust protection.
When we look at effectiveness, we see excellent level of antibody in these children.
The vaccine is 2 shots taken 4 weeks apart, 25% of the adult dose. The company says it is 51% effective for ages 6 months to 2 years and 37% for ages 2 through 5. Those numbers only tell part of the story, according to a doctor who helped conduct the trial.
There was no severe disease or hospitalizations observed within the trial, but we did see some infections.
Anne Rodriguez enrolled her twin 4-year-olds, in part to protect vulnerable adults in the family.
It was really important for us to get our kids vaccinated as soon as we reasonably could.
But a majority of parents of young children appear much more tentative.
Oh, I'm not sure. I might wait for some other kids to get it first.
I think it's not necessary at this moment.
Only 28% of kids ages 5 to 11 have gotten 2 doses of the vaccine. The FDA could authorize Moderna's pediatric vaccine as early as June. The CDC says 75% of children 17 and younger have contracted COVID. Medical experts recommending even children who are infected with Omicron should be vaccinated.
Number one, we don't know how long infection-induced immunity lasts. And number two, vaccines don't just protect against the variant that they had. They can protect against future variants.
And now, after a long wait, the youngest among us may soon get that protection.
All right, Stephanie joins us now. Stephanie, what about Pfizer? We know they're also working as well on another vaccine for children. Will it be looking like a similar process for the emergency use authorization?
It will be, Tom. They're looking to ask for this EUA later on this spring, so they get in line kind of behind Moderna. Their dosage is going to be less than Moderna's dosage, but they're asking for 3 shots instead of 2, so it'll be a different course.
Yeah,
Tom?
maybe a little confusing to parents, and we're going to clear that up hopefully in our next segment. Stephanie, thank you for all of that. For more on this announcement from Moderna today, I want to bring in a pediatrician, medical director of Gramercy Pediatrics, Dr. Diane Hess. Dr. Hess, thanks so much for joining Top Story tonight. I really do appreciate it. I want to roll through some stats, and I want to ask you a question on the back end of this. So I want to start first with some of the stuff we saw in Stephanie's piece. First, this new vaccine, 51% efficacy for ages 6 months to 2 years old. I want to remind people that the other one is 37% effective for ages 2 years old to 5 years old. 75% of children 17 and younger, right, have already contracted COVID-19, this according to the CDC. And then, of course, our next graphic here, hospitalization rates for unvaccinated children ages 5 to 11 were twice as high as among those who were vaccinated during the Omicron surge. You know, and one of the things we also know about the regular vaccine was that its efficacy was more than 90%. So my question is, if more than 75% of kids have already gotten COVID, right, and some kids will only have this about a little bit more than 30% effective for them, is it worth it? Should parents still get the vaccine for these kids?
I do believe so, because what we know is that it decreases hospitalization and severe disease. So you never know. It's Russian roulette. Is your child going to be the one who's going to get that severe case of COVID? Just like we get the flu vaccine and we still might get the flu. And, you know, everybody's become a COVID specialist. Like, we have a planet full of virologists now. Like, everybody's, knows their immunology better than everybody else. But you have to remember, when I give the flu vaccine to patients, I say you still might get the flu, but you won't be hospitalized for the flu. That's the kind of way you have to think about the COVID vaccine. Everybody thinks a COVID vaccine prevents you from getting COVID, and that's not what it was sold as, and it's not how it works. What we know is that, as you saw, the hospitalization rate was much higher much higher, for double, for children
But why do you
unvaccinated.
think, for the kids that do qualify to this point, why do you think that the rate is just, I think it's around 27% of parents that have actually gotten the vaccine for their kids?
I think the messaging has been terrible. I think the CDC changes their guidelines every day and people are fed up. I'm a doctor. It is hard. It is a hard sell. You know, I have a very pro-vaccine practice, and when it came out, you know, people were lining up. I was the first pediatrician in New York City to get the COVID vaccine. So, I mean, we had mob scene at our office, but that was that certain percentage of parents who really trusted the science and really wanted their kids getting the vaccine. And also, we were in New York City, so we'd been through the worst pandemic. We weren't allowed to leave our apartments. I mean, people who live in a suburb with a backyard in warm weather, they had a very different experience going through the first wave of the pandemic than families that lived in cities, in housing, had to get in elevators. And you have to remember, now in New York City, we are the only place that still has children 2 to 4 wearing masks. So parents are desperate to get their kids vaccinated so they get these masks off their kids.
What would you say to parents who say, listen, we've been told from the get-go, you should never put anything in your body unless you really need it? If there's some children who fall into this window where it's 31% effective for them, they've already gotten COVID, they've been okay, they didn't have to go to the hospital, do you think they still need the COVID vaccine? Are you still recommending it?
I will recommend it. I definitely will recommend it because we don't know what's going to come. This is such a tricky virus. It changes on us all the time. I mean, I know that it's going to do no harm, and that's the most important thing, right? So we want to do public health. We want to vaccinate for the people who can't get vaccinated. We want to stop this pandemic around the planet. We see how effective it was in the adults. We're both not wearing masks. It took 2 years to get here. I haven't been in person in 2 years.
Right.
We need
our kids. But I mean, to be fair,
right.
The vaccine for adults is more than 90% effective.
We're talking about, well, actually only for the first.
Right. We're talking about
strain.
much different numbers when it comes to children.
Yes, but I still think, just like other vaccines that we use, it might not prevent the virus from happening or the bacterial infection from happening, but you will be much less sick. And that's what people have to understand. But I do respect parents who are going to say, no, I don't think they're going to be able to mandate this vaccine at this point. I think that, you know, I think the cat was out of the bag a long time ago. I don't think the masks were effective at all during Omicron. I mean, we had patients, I couldn't keep up. We could not keep up with how many patients were positive.
So, you know, Moderna and Pfizer, obviously we've learned they have different dosage treatments, right? 2 shots versus 3 shots. Dr. Fauci has signaled he hopes the FDA, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but almost goes with one or the other because it can be incredibly confusing to parents. What do you think the solution is here? Because obviously Pfizer's going to be next up.
You know, I think people like choice. I think some people who had their Moderna shot and did really well with it are going to want their kids to get Moderna. I think everybody, we had to give Pfizer because that's all we had. Personally, I got Pfizer, but I see that my friends who are physicians and, you know, other people who got vaccinated, I think they did better with Moderna as far as the rates of immunity. But I still took my 3rd Pfizer booster because I started with Pfizer and I continued with it, and I have faith in it. I just think that the more people, remember, we're only talking about the United States. This is a worldwide pandemic. The more people we get vaccinated, the faster we will pass through this.
You know, one parent we heard there in Stephanie's report was saying she's getting her kids vaccinated, not so much for the children, but for the elderly relatives that they have who are vulnerable. Are you finding a lot of cases like this as well, people who are looking out for their other relatives?
Absolutely. And it's very common here in New York City that we have multi-generational households. So, you know, you don't want to
it's also, it's pretty common around the country, too.
Yeah, but we're crowded.
Yeah.
So we want to get as many people vaccinated so we don't have to worry that we're going to get grandma or grandpa sick, and that we can have an Easter dinner, and that we can have, you know, other family gatherings. I think it's really important.
Okay, Dr. Diane, great having you. Thank you so much. We do appreciate it. We want to turn now to the economy and some disappointing news. New data shows the economy shrank in the first quarter, the weakest performance since the start of the pandemic, and a reverse from the strong growth we saw last year. NBC's Tom Costello explains why the numbers are moving in the wrong direction.
Tonight, further evidence of the economic paradox Americans are living with every day. Strong consumer demand is sending prices skyrocketing for everything from groceries to gas to cars to travel. And unemployment is at 50-year lows with plenty of jobs available. Still, the economy actually shrank 1.4% in the first 3 months of the year. The president insists the January Omicron surge played a big role.
What you're seeing is enormous growth in the country that was affected by everything from COVID and the COVID blockages that occurred along the way.
Analysts say the economy unexpectedly contracted because the government cut back on pandemic-related spending and the U.S. imported more goods than it exported, America buying more than it sells overseas. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine and China's new COVID lockdowns are worsening the global supply chain crisis. In South Carolina, Nephron Pharmaceuticals is now building its own production plants since it can't get enough supplies from overseas. It also has hundreds of job openings, but must offer high wages and very flexible hours to attract workers.
Come whenever you want, stay as long as you can or as short as you can, and we try to pay even at the end of the shift.
The fear tonight, with higher prices, higher housing costs, higher wages, and the Fed poised to raise rates again, the country could be pushed into a recession.
You've got workers that finally got out of the cold and into the warmth of rising wages, and now they're getting burned by inflation, having to take on an extra job to make ends meet.
All right, Tom joins us now from our D.C. bureau. Tom, late today, Amazon and Apple both reported earnings after the closing bell. You know, since the pandemic, Amazon has been on a tear. What are we learning now from both those companies?
So Amazon also suggested that it is seeing sales slow because now we're starting to see the consumer get back to the pre-pandemic shopping habits. And so with that, Amazon stock lost some ground today. Apple reported blowout numbers, but said that now they've got issues in China with the supply chain and production, and they don't think that they can meet demand going forward, or it's going to be a challenge. And the supply chain issues with China may last through the year. So now Apple stock has also lost ground.
All right, Tom Costello for us. Tom, we appreciate that. Now to the free speech lawsuit filed against ESPN by one of its star anchors. Sage Steele claims the network punished her for comments she made about the vaccine mandate and President Obama. NBC's Zincle Esamoah has the details.
Welcome to another live edition of SportsCenter alongside Matt Berry. I'm Sage Steele.
She's one of ESPN's biggest stars, even anchoring its flagship broadcast today. Tonight, she's hit the network with a big lawsuit.
I respect everyone's decision. I really do. Yeah. But to mandate it is sick. Mm-hmm. And it's scary to me in many ways.
Steele, who says she's vaccinated, discussed her COVID views on former NFL quarterback Jay Cutler's podcast back in 2021. Steele brought up comments about her biracial identity, then called out President Obama.
Barack Obama chose black and he's biracial. I'm like, well, congratulations to the president. That's his thing. I think that's fascinating considering his black dad was nowhere to be found, but his white mom and grandma raised him. But hey, you do you.
That interview, Steele says, led to retaliation for her remarks.
It's a little off to see someone who's been there for a while, has been developing and coming along, taking on the network at this point in her career.
By early October, ESPN responded, pulling Steele off the air temporarily, saying conversations with the anchor would remain private. Now she's suing for damages and alleged violations of her civil rights. The lawsuit says her employer continued to punish Steele by removing her from prime assignments and bowed to groupthink and forced Steele to publicly apologize and suspended her for a period of time in October 2021.
When it comes to free speech, what is protected in the workplace?
She works for a private company, and that private company can make employment-based decisions based on what she says.
Kevin Goldberg is the First Amendment specialist at the Freedom Forum in Washington, D.C.
The First Amendment itself, as a constitutional right, only restricts the actions of government in silencing people.
The lawsuit says Connecticut law prohibits private employers from disciplining their employees for engaging in constitutionally protected speech in or outside the workplace.
She has a much stronger case in Connecticut than she would at the federal level.
In response to the allegations, ESPN says Sage remains a valued contributor on some of ESPN's highest profile content, including the recent Masters telecasts and anchoring our noon sports center, also denying the company ever suspended Steele.
We're living in a time when people have their own personal social media pages. They have many opinions and often want to vocalize them. Is this mode of operation still working in the year 2022?
I don't think we want big companies to be acting that quickly. We want more speech, not less. We hope that she's sparking a public conversation. That is what the First Amendment and free speech as a matter of policy are all about.
All right, Zincle joins us now live. Zincle, what does Steele hope to get from this suit? Do we know?
Yeah, Tom, so clearly this is a high-profile case, especially given that Steele is still working at ESPN. Her lawsuit says she's seeking punitive damages due to lost revenue and lost business opportunities. For example, her team actually points out that in February, just months ago, Steele submitted a complaint to HR, and soon after, she was offered a chance to co-anchor the Masters. They said the company's response was an obvious scheme to try and dodge responsibility. Of course, ESPN denies all allegations, but it's definitely a story to watch. Tom?
All right, Zinkley Esamal with that new reporting tonight. Zinkley, we thank you for that. For more on this high-profile lawsuit, I want to bring in Jennifer Justice. She's founder and CEO of the legal group, the Justice Department. Jennifer, thanks for joining Top Story tonight. You're an entertainment lawyer. From your perspective, do you think Sage Steele has a case against Disney?
Yeah, I definitely do, especially given the Connecticut law.
Can you expand a little bit on that? Because we're not all lawyers here.
Yeah. So the man that was just before me, he had explained that when you come to free speech, it protects government employees, but Connecticut takes it a step further and talks about private speech as well in the context of your workplace.
You know, sometimes when you sign contracts, and I don't know anything about Sage Steele's contracts, but I do know a thing or two about on-air contracts. Sometimes you sign these contracts and there are clauses in there that if you were to bring any type of embarrassment to the network or to the company, that they could take legal action against you or they could, you know, eventually terminate you. Would this fall under that category?
Well, it could, but I also think, you know, as the woman who was just before me had stated, like in 2022, a lot of these contracts are super outdated, you know, and what they stand for and the maxims they stand for are incredibly outdated, in that we all have and should have a freedom of speech regardless of who we work for, right? Our personal life versus our public life. And yes, if we had seen her agreement and it could have something in there, maybe it would. But there is what is legal and then what is the public perception and what, you know, we want this world to be and how we want it to grow.
So she sues ESPN, but she's still working there. How would that kind of relationship work, whether they settle or they decide to take this to an arbitrator or something?
Well, hopefully, you know, everyone will deal with it as, you know, human, you know, adults and human beings. She has a legitimate case. She wants to bring it. And, you know, she should let it play out. You know, it got to this point because they weren't coming to a conclusion, unfortunately. And now, you know, if they went and fired her, she'd probably have a retaliation claim over this. And so, you know, it's probably not the most cordial of workplaces right now, but I'm hoping that they can get through this because she has every right to say what she felt about their mandate.
If you were advising ESPN tonight, what would you tell them to do?
I would tell them to look at the world around them now and look at like what people, you know, what everybody's opinions are and like really think about this. Like, don't think about what we used to do, Let's think about the future. Let's, you know, listen to people and their opinions. We're not all just workers. Like we are human beings.
Jennifer Justice, a person who may have the best name for being a lawyer. We appreciate you joining Top Story tonight. Hope to see you again. Thank you for your perspective. All right, still ahead tonight, the fiery crash on a California highway, an SUV barreling into a police cruiser, sparking a massive fire. 3 people rushed to the hospital. A 4th led away in handcuffs. How it all unfolded. Plus, growing outrage over the Russ body cam footage release, the letter just sent by Halyna Hutchins' family, and the shocking new video of the moment Alec Baldwin learned of her death. And wild delivery, Olivia Wilde, the actress and director, stunned on stage with custody papers from her former fiancé, Jason Sudeikis. Issa Gutierrez is in the house looking into why that dramatic moment played out so publicly. Top Story, just getting started on this Thursday night. Stay with us. Back now with the controversy surrounding footage released this week in connection to the Rush shooting. The family of Halyna Hutchins speaking out, slamming the sheriff's decision to release video of the moments after she was shot to the public, arguing it could do irreparable damage to the couple's young son. NBC's Maggie Vespa has more.
Tonight, outrage over the decision to publicly release video showing Halyna Hutchins' final moments in the Russet shooting. The family of the cinematographer condemning the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office for releasing video of the chaotic scene when she was shot and killed and demanding the footage be taken down, saying the move failed to respect the family's dignity and privacy by releasing the materials to the public before releasing the materials to Mr. Hutchins. An attorney for Matt Hutchins writing in a letter, the first time Mr. Hutchins saw the disturbing and unsettling video footage of his dying wife lying on the church floor was on Radar Online, an internet website. Adding about the couple's 9-year-old son, we fear, for example, that this shocking footage of Andros's mother dying may be material used by bullies to emotionally abuse him in the future. Tonight, the sheriff is declining NBC's request for an interview, saying earlier this week on Today, his office released the evidence in response to public records requests.
We were under an obligation to release it right now?
Not right now. It took us some time to put it together, and we tried to release it as soon as we had everything together.
The trove of videos and documents made public 6 months into the Rust investigation. It includes raw clips of actor Alec Baldwin moments after the fatal shooting, and tonight, new video released by the sheriff's office shows Baldwin hours later learning Hutchins had died.
I do have some very unfortunate news to tell you. She didn't make it.
The actor declining NBC's request for comment tonight. Baldwin's attorney earlier this week says he believes the evidence shows he acted responsibly and was very careful with guns on set. Matt Hutchins not commenting beyond his statement, but saying this to Hoda in February about the public nature of the shooting.
Why did the fact that details were out there, why was that so bothersome?
Well, I mean, think about how you would feel. All of this happens so publicly. Justice won't bring Halyna back, but maybe the memory of her can help keep people safe.
Tonight, a grieving husband and worried father struggling to protect his family from very public pain.
All right, Maggie Vespa joins us now live from Los Angeles. Maggie, there are multiple lawsuits flying back and forth in this case. Let's start with Matt Hutchins, Halyna's husband. He's filed a wrongful death suit against Alec Baldwin and the film's producers. Is he personally taking action yet tied to the release of this video?
Yeah, Tom, not at this time. Right now, he's just demanding via his attorneys the sheriff's office take that video down. But as you said, there are multiple lawsuits, and we just got an update on another one. Lawyers for Rust producers late today asking the court to remove a request for punitive damages in a suit filed by a script supervisor, a woman named Mamie Mitchell. They argue Mitchell legally needs to prove producers acted, in their words here, with malice or oppression leading up to the shooting. But in her suit, they argue she describes just a series of mistakes basically made on set. We should note we have reached out to Mitchell and her attorney, Gloria Allred. No response at this time. Tom.
All right, Maggie Vespa for us tonight. Maggie, we appreciate that. Now moving on to a messy celebrity moment, somewhat sad moment. Olivia Wilde was served papers while speaking on stage in Las Vegas as her custody case with Jason Sudeikis turned ugly. Whether it was a low blow or just business as usual is up for debate. Isa Gutierrez has more.
Tonight, A-list custody battle on stage.
They wouldn't show up on an x-ray. Is this supposed to feel like a cross-examination?
Olivia Wilde served papers in front of an audience at CinemaCon in Las Vegas Tuesday. Variety reporting the actor-director was mid-presentation when someone in front of the stage slid her a mysterious manila envelope labeled personal and confidential. Those papers regarding custody over her children with Ted Lasso star and former SNL comedian Jason Sudeikis, according to sources close to Sudeikis.
Come on, Rob, you gotta get it in there to get 3 points.
At the time, Wilde was promoting Don't Worry, Darling, a film she directed starring her current boyfriend, Harry Styles.
Okay, positive affirmation time.
Wilde and Sudeikis broke up in 2020 after 9 years together. They share 2 children, Otis, 8, and Daisy, 5. Wilde and Styles made headlines last year after photos surfaced of the 2 of them holding hands at a friend's wedding.
I think that all of the context makes this a very hot topic.
Questions about why Wilde was served on stage this week immediately flooding the internet.
Jason Sudeikis allegedly served custody papers to Olivia Wilde at CinemaCon. This is actually true. That's so bold.
I think the internet is thinking that this is a lot more malicious maybe than it might be.
According to sources close to Sudeikis, the woman who served the papers to Wilde was a process server hired by Sudeikis' law firm to deliver the custody documents to her. Those sources told NBC News in an email Sudeikis had no prior knowledge of the time or place that envelope would have been delivered, as this would solely be up to the process service company, adding that he would, quote, never condone her being served in such an inappropriate manner. Representatives for Wilde did not respond to a request for comment.
It's us.
So we get to sit and talk.
Yeah.
It was a pretty straightforward serve.
Ross Maller's company wasn't involved, but is used to serving celebrities. Here's a video he took of them serving civil case papers to former NBA player Matt Barnes in 2017.
Matt, you left the papers on the floor, Matt.
We've served presidents, vice presidents, professional football players, musicians. We serve 50 Cent. Celebrities typically don't, they don't just live in a house in the middle of a block without walls or gates or security. You have to be a little bit creative in ways to serve them. Now, the only thing you have to be conscious of is making sure that you're not breaking any laws when you're serving them. So if you're not trespassing, breaking and entering, if you're there legally, which this person was, they simply purchased a ticket to this event, then there's no problems with the way that the paper was served.
In a statement, the head of CinemaCon said organizers will reevaluate their security protocols. And, quote, we have never in the history of the convention had an incident where a delegate has approached the stage who was not authorized to be there.
It's not uncommon for someone to register for an event to serve someone?
No, not at all.
Could they have waited until she had gone off the stage or finished talking?
I don't think she's walking off the stage and just plowing through the entire crowd. She probably goes through the back of the stage into a private area, into a private car, and you probably wouldn't have any access to her. In my opinion, that's the only time that they had access to Olivia Wilde.
All right, Issa Gutierrez joins us now live in studio. So, Issa, we heard Jason Sudeikis there said he had no idea this was going to happen. What happens in these situations when people are going through these custody battles? Do they know how the other person is going to be served, the other parent?
Tom, it is totally feasible for one of the parents to not know this information. So what Ross from Lexitas Legal explained to me is that, yes, there are some cases where attorneys representing parents are totally transparent and communicating throughout the legal process. But oftentimes the client does not know all of the details, including how the other parent might get served.
Okay. Issa Gutierrez, we thank you for that. A lot of people talking about that story. When we come back, the FDA's new proposal, it says, could save hundreds of thousands of lives in the next few decades. More on that significant step after a break. All right, we are back now with Top Stories Newsfeed, and we begin with the FDA's new plan to ban menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars. More than a third of cigarettes sold in the U.S. are menthols. The FDA's proposal, still in its draft stage, it could face years of legal challenges from the tobacco companies. A fiery crash injuring a highway patrol officer southeast of L.A. There were actually a few of them. A police vehicle bursting into flames on the side of a freeway after witnesses say an SUV rear-ended it. 2 officers were inside at the time of the crash. Another was outside the car and was also hurt. Their injuries are not considered life-threatening. The driver of the other car was arrested on suspicion of DUI. Now to the suspect in a disturbing home break-in in California is under arrest. Surveillance video capturing this man standing over a couple as they lay in bed sleeping. Their baby sleeping feet away in another room. The burglar taking a wedding ring and some money from the home in San Bernardino. It's still unclear how he got into the house. This happened back in February, and police are trying to find out if he was involved in other incidents. And late night TV is going to look a little different next year. A CBS spokesperson saying James Corden extended his contract with The Late Show only until next spring. He's hosted the show since 2015 and is known for segments like Carpool Karaoke and Crosswalk the Musical. And we head to Washington now. President Biden asking Congress to approve a $33 billion in additional aid for Ukraine. This comes as Biden also announced additional sanctions today against high-ranking officials and billionaires in Russia. NBC's Kristen Welker joins us now from the White House with more on this. Kristen, this is a large spending package. What's included here?
Hi, Tom. Well, good to be with you. President Biden announced that sweeping new Ukraine aid package with a warning to Russia. Aggression will not win. Threats will not win. The price tag is a massive $33 billion, as you said. That's more than double the entire aid that Congress approved last month. It includes ammunition, armored vehicles, and humanitarian aid. Now, in a sign the administration is bracing for a prolonged conflict, the package is really aimed at lasting for 5 months. The challenge now is how quickly can they get this package through Congress, with Ukraine urgently pleading for more help as Russia intensifies its assault. Now, the president did also announce new sanctions against Russian billionaires today, and a plan that would make it easier to seize the assets of oligarchs. Tom?
Kristen, with the country facing a shrinking economy and fears of a recession, will these factor into the challenges of passing this bill? You just mentioned it could be a challenge.
It really could be a challenge, Tom. Look, there seems to be bipartisan support for the Ukraine aid, but that's where any agreement ends. Right now, the debate is really around how to get this passed. Democrats want to link it to COVID relief funding, so that's even more money. But many Republicans are opposed to that idea for all the reasons you just mapped out. When asked today about that, the president said he doesn't care about the process as long as Congress approves both Ukraine aid and funding to fight COVID. Tom.
Kristen Welker from the White House tonight for us. Kristen, thank you. Now to top stories, power and politics. The latest headlines from Washington and beyond. The battle for a crucial Nevada Senate seat is heating up. Republicans calling on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to supercharge their campaign. The party aiming to flip a seat held by Democrats since 1987. Juan Venegas is there on the ground for us.
And I'm honored to introduce my dear friend, a great patriot, and America's governor, Ron DeSantis.
Coming in hot to Nevada, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis arriving in Las Vegas last night.
God bless you. God bless Nevada.
DeSantis is now using his base's popularity to help his friend and former roommate, Republican candidate Adam Laxalt, now campaigning to flip the U.S. Senate seat held by Democratic incumbent Senator Catherine Cortez Masto.
This November, let's elect Adam Laxalt to the United States Senate.
The Nevada Senate seat could determine what party has a majority as Republicans attempt to flip control of Congress in the coming midterm elections. The latest polls indicating this could be a tight race.
100. Perfect.
A state where a large number of nonpartisan undecided voters could swing the results either way.
Now, Nevada needs someone that will break from the radical left, break from these policies that are crushing our state and our country.
Just a few days ago, it was Ted Cruz visiting Nevada. Democrats here facing unhappy voters as the cost of living becomes unaffordable across the state. In Clark County, 1 in 20 residents are unemployed, and over the last year, gasoline prices rising as much as 48%, with inflation racing costs across the board, from food to cars.
Catherine did her job for Nevada, and that's something I won't forget.
Yet Senator Cortez Masto is working to stay in office after becoming the first Latina U.S. senator to represent Nevada in a Senate seat held by Democrats since 1987.
The fact that Ron DeSantis is here, we had Ted Cruz here, supporting the senator's opponents. What do you say about, what can you say about that?
I would say that the senator doesn't need national political leaders to come speak on her behalf. People know that she gets results done for them. Passing legislation that got police $3 million to build a new facility for training, getting us back to work.
As the race builds up, the state is sure to become a battleground for any Republican thinking about the next presidential election.
They're selling DeSantis hats.
Yes, they
are. For $20, they were selling them outside.
They are.
And people were paying $20 for these hats.
Yes.
And leaving with a smile.
You got it. We did.
All right, Guad Venegas joins us now from Las Vegas. Guad, as we saw in your piece there, it might have been an event for candidate Adam Laxalt, but it appears it was DeSantis who made some headlines. Guad, what was your sense of how supporters there, Republican voters, saw DeSantis?
Right, Tom. So, we know that Ron DeSantis is hot right now. He's been in the spotlight for many reasons. And of course, this is good for him to leave his state, come to Nevada and receive this much support. We were told that this is the largest event that Adam Laxalt has organized. So it was a win for Ron DeSantis. But for Adam Laxalt, his first goal now is to win the primary and become the Republican candidate so that he can move on and face Catherine Cortez Masto, face the senator in the primary election. So it's a win-win situation. And for Ron DeSantis, this proves that he can leave his state and show how much Republicans support him in other places across the country. So much that, as we saw, people are making hats that say Ron DeSantis 2024.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see that. But a lot of people watching that Nevada race in the midterms. Guad, we thank you for that. Still ahead, the toxic foam clouds covering a town where authorities say where it came from. That's coming up in Global Watch. Stay with us. All right, we're back now with Top Stories Global Watch, and we begin in Ethiopia, dealing with its worst drought in 40 years. This hospital's seen an influx of malnourished and starving children because of it. Earlier this week, the UN's aid chief warned 2 million kids are at risk of starving to death in the Horn of Africa. Next to the toxic foam clouds covering parts of a town in Colombia. It's happening in a town near the capital of Bogota. Local environmentalists say the foam comes from a polluted river. People there saying it stinks and that the residue from it can be corrosive. Some locals also saying it causes respiratory problems. And Canada changing its blood donation rules to be more inclusive. It's reversing a policy that restricted gay and bisexual men from donating blood for 3 months after being sexually active. Under the new rule, all potential donors will be screened for, quote, high-risk behaviors, regardless of gender or sexuality. It goes into effect in September. Okay, coming up, spring break's winding down, but summer's just around the corner. We've got some tips to keep you from feeling so up in the air when it comes to travel. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's been a long 2 years dealing with the pandemic, and with vaccinations up and restrictions lifting, Americans are ready to travel again. But the first thing you should pack is a little patience, of course, because getting to where you want to go may take longer and it's a lot more expensive. NBC senior consumer investigative correspondent Vicki Nguyen has the travel tips you need to know before you book.
Americans are definitely ready to roam. Passenger numbers are soaring, almost back to pre-pandemic levels, with more than 2 million flyers on most days. The surge in demand and rising oil prices have pushed airfares up 40% since January. The Points guy, Brian Kelly, says if you're looking to get away, act quickly, be flexible, and book nonstop flights whenever possible. And don't bank on those last-minute deals.
There are no seats available if you want to book last minute. And the ones that are available last minute are generally astronomical.
One of the biggest changes during the pandemic, a lot of airlines did away with those pesky change fees. Remember, they used to charge you around $200 if you altered your travel plans? It's still free to change most flights, but not all, so be careful which ticket you buy. While booking, you want to be on the lookout for the word basic. Here on the Delta website, for example, a flight from New York to Dallas, the basic flight is right here, and the fare is $30 less than the main fare. Over here on JetBlue, it's called Blue Basic, and it's $52 less than the more flexible Blue fare. Nearly every airline now has a basic economy fare. In most cases, you can't choose your seat, you're the last aboard, and sometimes there's a carry-on bag fee. Any change could cost hundreds. If you can, book with miles or points instead. Kelly says those are usually refundable. And watch the conditions where you are and where you're going. He uses the site Flight Aware.
When you see those delays starting to hit the plane that's coming in, you can be proactive and book yourself on another flight. Also, book your flights using credit cards that give you travel protection.
If you're caught in cancellation chaos, like thousands of passengers this past weekend, get the first available flight out on any airline. Then demand your refund later. And if you can't get through to customer service,
there's a clever hack a lot of us use in the industry. Call a foreign customer service line of an airline. Often those wait times are much shorter than in the U.S., and all of the agents speak English.
Check your passport expiration. It can take 12 weeks to renew. But if you need it sooner, call your local congressperson. Do you have to pay for that?
You don't have to pay a dime. You call, you say, I'm a constituent. Can you speed it up for me. And I've had people get it in about a week.
While most foreign countries will let you enter with proof of vaccination, you still need a negative test result to get back to the U.S. Instead of hassling to get a COVID test overseas, pack your own authorized rapid antigen test. As long as you do it over a video call with a medical professional, it's also valid for re-entry.
You can travel very well these days, but you need to just make sure you plan.
All right, Vicky joins us now. So, Vicky, it's been a while since we've seen a surge like this, and I'll be honest, I've looked for travel deals. They are impossible to find right now. So you have to wonder, is it time to even start working with a travel agent again?
Absolutely, Tom. Travel experts tell us not only can travel agents get better deals on those big trips, they can really help you out if you're in a jam. Let's say you're in multiple locations, you got multiple families coming, and somebody's flight gets canceled. A travel agent will be a great travel advocate, and they'll help you save money.
So the other big question is travel insurance. Sometimes people advise you not to get it, that it was a waste of money. You could pick it up on your credit card or something like that. But it just seems now with COVID that so many times you have to cancel vacations because somebody in the family maybe gets sick. What's your advice?
Well, what we hear from a lot of folks who travel is look at your trip. Is it a high dollar trip? Is it an international destination? How far out is it? If all of those answers are yes, you will want to consider travel insurance to protect that investment. But don't get it through the airline or the hotel. Look for outside travel companies. The premiums will be lower. Just make sure you read the fine print to make sure that you know what actually is covered, because sometimes they don't cover cancellation for COVID.
We've had such cold weather here in New York. A vacation sounds good right about now. All right, Vicky, we thank you for that. And we thank you at home for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.